Good morning. Whoever you are and whomever you love, you're welcome here. Whether you worship many gods, one God, or no God, you are welcome here. And whether you walked in on little feet, strolled in, or rolled in, you are welcome and celebrated here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Indianapolis. Our opening words today are by David Pohl. We come to this time and this place to rediscover the wondrous gift of free religious community, to renew the faith in the holiness, goodness, and beauty of life, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and full heart, to rekindle the flame of memory and hope, and to reclaim the vision of an earth made fair, with all her people one. Please rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 347, Gather the Spirit.
So welcome and good morning. My name is Jamie Hinson-Rieger. I'm the worship leader here at UUI, so it is a privilege to greet you on this magnificently gray and rainy Sunday morning. We celebrate the spirit of liberal religion, which invites us to question openly, to love fiercely, and to live faithfully, in service to our collective dream of a world in which all people know peace and well-being. As we gather today, may we be grateful to those who came before us, who kept that spirit alive, and may we be grateful for our own opportunity to carry that spirit forward.
As we light our chalice, please join me in saying our covenant, which is in your order of service or here on the screen. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. And now we're going to say our covenant in Spanish. My first time being up here saying it with all of you. The words are on the screen as well in your bulletin. El amor es la doctrina de esta iglesia y servir es nuestra ley para habitar juntos en paz, para buscar la verdad con el amor y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. Este es nuestro pacto. Please be seated.
We have just a few announcements this morning. The Big Questions Forum is on hiatus for the summer. We will meet again in September. And there will also be no pub theology in June because I will be in Kansas City for General Assembly along with your other UUI General Assembly delegates. So look for that in July. After the service today, artists will be in the sanctuary to talk about the magnificent artwork that is gracing our sanctuary today. And then today in the service, we're learning about Midrash, which is a spiritual practice around questioning. And there will be a Midrash banger hung on the wall where you will be able to add your own reflections and questions to that. I want to offer a special welcome this morning to our esteemed guest speakers, artist David Landis, Indiana Poet Laureate Shari Wagner, and Rabbi Sandy Sasso, and to our special guest singer, Lori Eckert. Welcome.
Okay. Spend all your time waiting for that second chance, for a break that would make it okay. There's always some reason to feel not good enough, and it's hard at the end of the day. I need some distraction. Oh, beautiful release. Memories seep from my veins. Let me be empty, oh, and weightless, and maybe I'll find some peace tonight. In the arms of the angel, fly away from here, from this dark, cold hotel room, and the endlessness that you fear. You are pulled from the wreckage of your silent reverie. You're in the arms of the angel. May you find some comfort here. So tired of the straight line, and everywhere you turn, there's vultures and thieves at your back. The storm keeps on twisting, keep on building the lies that you make up for all that you lack. It don't make no difference escaping one last time. It's easier to believe in this sweet madness, oh, this glorious sadness. brings me to my knees in the arms of the angel. Fly away from here, from this dark old hotel room, and the endlessness that you feel. You are pulled from the wreckage of your silent reverie. You're in the arms of the angel. May you find some comfort here. You're in the arms of the angel. May you find some comfort here.
I'd like to invite the children up for a story. Come on down. Come on down. All right. You've all got your wizarding trunks. That's good. That's good. All right. Thank you for joining me this morning. This is a story about telling stories. So Danny and Sarah love to sit outside the library on a Saturday morning and make up stories about the people that they saw walking down the street. That guy, said Sarah, pointing at a gentleman walking down the street, is a spy. And he's going to the library because there's a secret message waiting for him in a book. Well, that lady, said Danny, is actually a robot, and she has been sent to stop that man. Well, just then they saw Jimmy walking down the street. Jimmy was the new kid at school. He'd only been there a couple of weeks, and he was hurrying on past. They said, "Hey, Jimmy, come hang out with us." And Jimmy said, "I can't. I got to be somewhere." He didn't even slow down. Danny said, "It's Saturday. Where you got to be?" Jimmy said, I got to go," and he hurried past. "Man," said Sarah, "that new kid never wants to hang out with anyone." "I know," said Danny. "It's always just, I got to go somewhere. I got to do something. It's like he thinks he's too cool for us." The next week at school, Danny and Sarah thought they'd try again. So they said, "Hey, Jimmy, why don't you come see a movie with us on Saturday?" Jimmy said, "I gotta," and Danny said, "What, you gotta do something? It's Saturday. Come see a movie with us." Well, Jimmy really seemed to be struggling with that, but finally he smiled and he said, "You know what? Okay, I'll go see a movie with you." And Sarah said, "Awesome, we're going to go see Robot Zombie Werewolf Dance Party 3. It's going to be awesome." So that Saturday, Danny and Sarah were waiting outside the movie theater, and they were playing their favorite game of making up stories about the people who came by. And Sarah said, "That guy, he's trying to sneak his pet weasel into the movie theater." Danny said, "Yeah, it's under his hat, but it's a talking weasel, and he's afraid it's going to ruin the movie for everyone." "Where's Jimmy?" said Sarah. "It's almost 12:30. He's going to make us late." Well, Jimmy never showed up. 12:30 came and went, no Jimmy. Sarah said, "That is so rude." They were walking back from the theater, and Danny said, "He just blew us off. He just blew us off. That makes me really mad." Then Sarah thought, well, maybe he had a reason. Maybe he's being held hostage. Danny said, "Yeah, maybe he's being held hostage by pirates." and they were waiting for a secret treasure map. And they took a trip down an alley, and Sarah said, maybe he's being held hostage in a cave guarded by a dragon. And they saw Jimmy. Danny said, hey, isn't that Jimmy? And Jimmy was off in the distance, and he had an apron tied around him, and he was unloading heavy boxes from a truck. Danny said, hey, Jimmy, what are you doing? And when Jimmy saw them, he looked really kind of upset and embarrassed. And Sarah said, we thought you'd been kidnapped by a dragon. And Jimmy said, what? And Danny said, don't worry about that. Why did you blow us off? Jimmy said, I didn't blow you off. I have to work at the restaurant. The guy who normally works here called in sick. It's my dad's restaurant. Well, just then, Jimmy's dad came out through the back door. He was a really big guy, and he was really sweaty from the heat of the kitchen. He said, hey, Jimmy, what are you doing standing around? You got to unload that before the frozen food melts. And then he saw Danny and Sarah. He stopped, and he said, are these your friends? And Jimmy said, yeah, these are my friends. So Sarah said, Mr. Jimmy's dad, if we helped Jimmy unload all of this food, could he hang out with us for a while? And Jimmy's dad thought about it, and he said, okay, you get this food unloaded. Jimmy, bring your friends into the restaurant. So they unloaded all of the boxes. It was a lot of work. But when they were done, they went inside the restaurant, and Jimmy's dad gave them ice cream sundaes. So they're eating the ice cream sundaes, and Danny said, Jimmy, why didn't you say something? We thought you blew us off. Sarah said, yeah, we thought you were too cool for us. Jimmy said, I don't know, I was embarrassed. None of you guys have to work on Saturday, but this restaurant's like a really big deal to my family, and it takes a lot of work to keep it going. Sarah said, okay, well, I'm glad now that we know your story. Hey, do you want to play our favorite game? And Jimmy said, what's that? And Sarah said, that guy over there is a spy. And that is the story of Jimmy, Danny, and Sarah and telling stories. Now we're going to sing you out to your classes under the fabulous rainbow banner. Thank you for joining me today to number 118 of This Little Light of Mine. Have a wonderful class.
It's my great pleasure to be here this morning and share some of my poems with you. I do want to make one correction to my introduction. I was the Indiana Poet Laureate during 2016 and 2017. The current Indiana Poet Laureate is Adrian Macheka, whose work I hope you check out. He's originally from Indianapolis and lives in Bloomington and teaches at IU, a wonderful poet. And I'm going to be sharing during the course of the service 3 poems from my book manuscript, The Farm Wife's Almanac. And these poems are all written in the voice of a Mennonite farm wife who lives in LaGrange County, Indiana. She's inspired a lot by my extended family, which includes many farm wives, and also by the years I've been teaching with the Religion, Spirituality, and Arts Seminar. And this first poem I'm going to read was written while we were looking at the story of Cain and Abel. The farm wife argues with God in the garden. I'm on my knees in the strawberry patch when I start the argument. Why did you prefer Abel's lamb to Cain's fresh greens and corn on the cob slathered in butter? Was it the smoke curling up to heaven you desired? There's plenty of steam in my kitchen when I'm canning. Or was it the tune Abel played on his flute? There's nothing prettier than the plink of jar lids as they're sealing. Cain could have used your thumbs up to help him grasp his hoe and wield the axe. We farmers kill the rooster, too, you know, and butcher steers. But it's not something we talk about. There's more pleasure in paring potatoes or shelling pods. If it's the sacrifice of a life you want, I'd say there's life in these bull thistles and beauty too. Persistence in how they sprout back with deeper roots. If it's blood that calls to you, why not what comes with the cycle of the moon, or the sweetness of the watermelon, split open, all that red juice on your mouth and hands?
This is the time in the service where we share our joys and sorrows with one another so that they may be held in community. In a moment, Kate will play some music and we'll light the candle here at the table. And if there's a joy or sorrow that is touching your heart today that you would like to acknowledge, I invite you to come up and light a candle. In addition, if you would like to share it with the congregation, you can write it on one of the slips of paper here in this basket or at the table at the end of the aisle, and just leave it in this basket and we will read it aloud. We only ask that you please be brief in your writing. Otherwise, please use this time for meditation, prayer, or reflection. I light a candle today for families being separated at our country's borders with a wish that all families be kept together and that all families be held in love. We have some joys and sorrows to share today. Paul and Debbie Schneider celebrated their 35th anniversary in Las Vegas. Happy anniversary. Kate Boyd shares, I can't wait to marry my friend and partner Brent Hagee this Friday. Looking forward to this new chapter. Congratulations. Jamie Fenner and Dominique share, 2 Bengal mixed kitties are looking for a new home. So see Jamie Fenner or Dominique if you are looking for a new feline friend. And a sorrow, many people at UUI know Kirk Horn and his family, and Kirk Horn has officially entered hospice. So please keep Kirk and his family in your thoughts and in your prayers. Our joys and sorrows are larger than just this space. They go out into our community and out into our world. I'd like to hold up 2 joys today in particular. One comes from very far from here, the Curiosity rover, which is currently tooling around on the surface of Mars and doing experiments, sent a message back to NASA that it had found organic matter in the soil just under the surface. I cannot pronounce the molecules that it found, even close, but they are fantastic molecules because they are possible evidence that life existed on Mars in the distant past. So well done, scientist people, and well done, good and faithful robot. And then I want to hold up a great joy. An estimated 50,000 people celebrated at Indy Pride yesterday, and many people for, yeah. Many people from UUI and other area UU churches marched in the parade, manned a booth, and showed up and celebrated under the banner of Central Indy UU. So it's a great joy that so many showed up to support and celebrate and hold up our message that all love is beautiful and all people are beautiful. This is a reading by Wendell Berry. We clasp the hands of those that go before us and the hands of those who come after us. We enter the little circle of each other's arms and the larger circle of lovers whose hands are joined in a dance, and the larger circle of all creatures passing in and out of life who move also in a dance to a music so subtle and vast that no one ear hears it except in fragments. Our meditation hymn is number 123, Spirit of Life.
The farm wife doesn't need to check her cell phone to know the weather. She just looks around her to read the signs. The farm wife predicts the weather. Mom taught me, like her mother taught her, to look for cats sneezing, crows prancing, poplars turning over their leaves. Observing the signs takes us back to the first farm wife Eve, tasting the hint of bitter weather in a thick apple skin. After the big flood, Noah's wife put 2 and 2 together. Harm a barn swallow, and it will rain for a month. Turn with me to Matthew 16. Jesus said, "Red sky at night, sailors' delight. Red sky in the morning, sailors' warning." Mary knew her son would need forewarning of rough waters. My daughters trust the satellites. Step outside, I tell them. Winter's chill is in the corn's tight husk.
And I acquired a wand, so everything's going great. Giving is an act of faith. We believe that what we have to offer makes a difference in this world. We may not see the effect of what we give, but still we give, trusting the life and works of this church. I invite you to give now as an act of faith. Except for designated pledges, half of the June offering will go to support meals for the Indiana Youth Group. IYG creates safe spaces, provides wellness programming, and educates LGBTQ youth and the community. UUI has been providing regular meals for the Friday night IYG youth group for many years. Your contribution allows us to continue this tradition of support. Today's offering will now be gratefully received. May it be joyfully given.
The skies by one God. Millions of us lift up our eyes to one God. So many children calling to God by many a different name. One Father, loving each the same. Many the ways all of us pray to one God. Many the paths
For the gifts that we have to give, and for this community, which truly seeks to live out its covenant that love is the spirit of this church and service is its law, may we be grateful.
Like the first farm wife Eve, the farm wife in my poems faces a number of losses. She loses her cows, her husband passes away, and even the farm itself is threatened by the takeover of corporate farms. But through it all, she retains her sense of awe and her connection to divine mystery. The farm wife finds grace in her empty barn. Inside the house, dust is dust, but here it looks holy, hanging in slanted light that slips between boards. Jacob's ladder could be rungs to a loft where barn swallows brush the dark with the curve of their wings. Every joint is pegged tight as Noah's Ark, but there's room for everyone, nesting sparrows and mice that scatter from burlap sacks. When I slide the big door back, sunlight rushes in to fill the empty bin where Jesus could be reaching up to touch black and white faces gazing down. I like to picture him swaddled by the breath of cows.
This June, UUI is delighted to be exhibiting artwork from the Religion, Spirituality, and the Arts Seminar. The Religion, Spirituality, and the Arts Seminar is a group of artists that meet together to create different forms of art in response to having studied and analyzed a particular religious text with Rabbi Sandy Sasso and other humanities experts. But we're not only exhibiting the work, we are collaborating with RSA artists to bring UUI two special services in June, this one today and a second service on June 24th. So I want to give a much thanks to the artist Dan Cooper and to Wendy Doherty, who have been helping put these services together and who cooked this up for you all. And I'm delighted to welcome today our guest speakers from the RSA seminar. Shari Wagner, who graced us with her beautiful poetry, was Indiana's 5th Poet Laureate 2016 to 2017. The author of 2 books of poems. Her poems have appeared in North American Review, Indiana Review, many other journals. She is co-author and editor of multiple nonfiction works, winner of literary awards and grants too numerous to mention. She teaches with the Indiana Writers Center since 2008 and is also on the faculty of the Religion, Spirituality, and the Arts Seminar. David Landis is an artist who is a member of the initial RSA seminar cohort. In addition to being an artist, he has also worked as a firefighter, EMT, and paramedic for over 28 years. He's taught workshops along with Rabbi Sasso based on the RSA process and experience, and continues to study, teach, and speak on the important role of creativity in our lives. And finally, Sandy Eisenberg Sasso is Rabbi Emerita of Congregation Beth El Zedek, where she's served for 36 years. She was the first woman ordained from the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in 1974. She and her husband, Dennis C. Sasso, are the first rabbinical couple in world Jewish history. After retiring from the synagogue, Sasso became director of the Religion, Spirituality, and the Arts Initiative. For 4 years, the program was hosted by Butler University. Beginning in the fall of 2018, it is part of the IUPUI, Arts and Humanities Institute. Rabbi Sasso is the author of a many award-winning children's book and 2 books for adults. She's the co-founder of Women for Change Indiana and writes a monthly column for the Indianapolis Star. And finally, Rabbi Sasso was recently presented, along with her husband, Rabbi Dennis Sasso, the 2018 Interfaith Ambassadors of the Year Award. So we are humbled and delighted that they are sharing their gifts with us today. Now I'd like to welcome up David Landis and Rabbi Sasso. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. It really is a pleasure to be here with you this morning. I keep bumping into people I know, so it feels like I'm really part of your community as well. I actually had a book published by the Unitarian Press, so I say we have some fellowship. I, too, want to add my thanks to Jamie, to Wendy, to Elizabeth, and all of you who have invited RSA into your sanctuary to share the experience with us. I want to especially thank Dan Cooper, who I know spent hours, because I have gotten so many emails from Dan, hours and hours putting this together. He too was in the first cohort of RSA, and so I am very grateful for the work that he has done. And it's great to sort of have a reunion with so many of the artists over the years. And I'm especially delighted to be sharing this with Dan Landis. So when I was about halfway through my rabbinate, someone asked me for some magazine article, could you tell me what was the text that influenced you the most in your rabbinate? And of course, oh my gosh, there's so many texts to choose from. And I thought for a while, and my answer was the absence of text. Now, you can understand I was the first woman in my seminary, very few women, there were no women rabbis at the time, and what I discovered was in reading all this text that I didn't have a voice there. There were stories and names that were missing, and it's this sort of space that needs to be filled that I think really prompted me to create Religion, Spirituality, and the Arts. So I would say that most people read the Bible, probably not Unitarians, but most people, wanting to know the literal meaning of the text. Jewish tradition also wants to know what the text doesn't say, wants to know how to fill the absences. What has been left out? What are the empty spaces of the narrative, and what are we to do with them? Most people, but I guess not Unitarians, approach the Bible to find answers. You know, how am I supposed to live my life? What are my values? Jews approach the Bible to discover the questions and the questions behind the questions. What are the questions we should really care about? The traditional Jewish method of exploring the text in this way is about filling in the blank spaces, asking questions, reconciling contradictions, dealing with theological conundrums. This method is known as Midrash, which really just means the word comes from seeking out. Each generation reads its life story into the text. The Bible is not the final word, but the first word. We are not intended to take the text literally. We are intended to take it seriously. And those two things are very different. So I want to share with you this Hasidic tale that will give you a good understanding of what we were doing in our seminar that created this beautiful array of art and poetry, and how wonderful it is to work with faculty like Shari Wagner. We're really grateful. So the rabbis had a debate. They always had debates, and they never agreed, of what actually happened on Sinai. What was heard on Sinai? Now, some people said, well, of course, the whole Torah. You know, the first 5 books, that's what was heard. But others said, no, that's way too long. They never would have stayed that long. I mean, standing all that time. It says it was the entire 10 Commandments, because that's the essence. And another said, no, that's still too long, too much. It was the first commandment. I am the Lord, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. That was enough. Once people knew that, everything followed. Then someone said, no, I don't even think that. I think it was the first word of the first commandment, and that is I. But in Hebrew, it is Anochi. And still, a Hasidic rabbi named Rabbi Mendel of Remenov said, oh, no, you're all wrong. Not even the first word of the first commandment, but only the first letter of the first word of the first commandment. And that letter, just need to know a bit of Hebrew. That letter is Aleph. And by the way, it has no sound. It has no sound. But actually, precisely, it's not actually silence. It's the beginning of sound. It's like when you open your mouth to speak, that's the Aleph. So what happened at Sinai is the beginning of a conversation. It wasn't any particular content. People filled in that content in their continual search for transcendence and meaning and the divine. It was the beginning of a conversation with the divine, a conversation in which we are all called to participate. There was not only one way to understand the text, but there were many ways. So you are Unitarian, so I'm thinking this approach is not terribly disturbing to you. You have to understand when I speak at other churches, they are like blown away by this. I mean, it's very difficult to believe that you can bring yourself to the text. But the truth is that we have, for a long time, brought ourselves to the text. So I'll just give you a simple example. What is the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden? What would you say? The apple, right? We all think it's an apple. Ha ha, guess what? It doesn't say it. It just says the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is what Eve ate. What's the fruit? We don't know. And actually, the rabbis come up with many answers. It was a fig, because after they got fig leaves, so that made sense. It was maybe it was a pomegranate. That seems more likely. How many apples grow in the Middle East? Very few apple trees. That totally doesn't make sense. So where in the world did we get the apple? It's from the Vulgate, the Latin translation of the Bible. When they saw fruit, they used the word malum, which means evil, but it also means apple. And so when people read the Latin translation, they said, well, it must have been an apple. So really, the process of reading into the text has been a long tradition. We are not doing this anew. And just one other brief example. So the last book in the Hebrew Bible is Chronicles, which talks about the rebuilding of the temple and returning to Jerusalem. What's the last book in the Christian Bible? Oh, I don't mean the New Testament. I'm sorry. I just mean, what's the last book? So sorry. It's the last book in the Old Testament among Christians. You don't know? How is that possible? It is, what'd you say? It's Malachi. And why? Because Malachi ends by talking about Elijah coming and announcing messianic days. So even the way we order the books is a kind of midrash. We are interpreting the text to be able to tell our story. So I'll give you one more example, because then David will tell you how all this makes sense for art. Cain and Abel. Shari mentioned the story in her poetry. It says, and Cain said to his brother Abel, and then they were in the field, and Cain killed his brother Abel. What's missing? What did they argue about? My God, what was this conversation? That was the most important part of the story, and they left it out. So the rabbis in the first centuries of the Common Era, around the same time that Jesus was teaching, and then also up until the probably 1200, so maybe the 13th, 12th century, said, okay, we're going to tell stories. We're going to tell stories. And they offered at least 3 reasons of how Cain and Abel were arguing. What did they argue about? They argued about property. Okay, Cain says, you're standing on my land, fly off. And Abel says, "You're wearing clothes from my wool from my sheep, strip." And so they argued about property. They also argued about where the temple was to be built. Now, don't worry that that's totally not chronological, because it's okay. There's no early or late in the Bible. So they argued about religion, in my place. And then, believe it or not, this takes a leap of imagination. They argued about sex. They argued about women. And you'll go, women? What women? There's Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve, you know. But of course, the rabbis imagined there were other women, and they both wanted the same woman. Now, when you think about this is exactly what we argue about today, okay? We argue about who owns what, you know, what are our boundaries, what's our property. We argue about religion, oh my God, yes. And we argue about sexuality. So when you fill in these spaces, you begin to tell your story. And that is what we have tried to do in approaching the text in religion, spirituality, and the arts. We would read one text. This coming year, we're going to do Lot's wife. I'm very excited about that. And we looked at many ways of looking at this text, through religious interpretation, through poetry, through music, through visual art. And then these amazing artists, and my greatest gift is getting to know all of them. They have really enriched my life, create something that I could never have imagined. They play with Scripture. There is the text, and there is you. What happens in the space in between is the making of Midrash, of art, of poetry, of beauty. And now I'd like to invite David Landis to tell you how that all actually happened.
I'd like to make an announcement of an event we're going to have here at UUI next Saturday afternoon at 2. It's a Making Your Own Midrash workshop. We're a little bit behind on the publicity, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but it just fits in so well now that you've defined it and given us some examples. So that's next Saturday, the 16th at 2 o'clock, right here. And we'll tell people a little bit again about Midrash and give you a chance to make your own, either in art or in the written word. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. She's a poet with RSA as well. I should just say there's a book about Midrash. So happens I'm the author outside, and I'd be happy to decide. Don't feel obligated, but if you'd like to know more, there's more to learn.
Neither I nor the people I grew up with in a very conservative Wesleyan church upbringing would have understood how much this rabbi has changed my understanding of my spirituality, of my creative process, of life in general, and of creativity. And that's what I'm here to speak about. I'm bothered by, annoyed, wrong word. What might be possible if each of us, if you, if I, grasped, understood the creativity that is within us? There is an energy in this world that we live. Whether we pay attention to it or not is another thing. But there's an energy, whether it be my atheist friends who see the world purely from a biological standpoint, there's an energy all around us wanting to create. The definition of creation, something more, something that wasn't before. If you're a spiritual person looking at it from a spiritual perspective, however you understand God or that spiritual being, it's a part of who we are. We want to create. We mistakenly misunderstand creativity first in its definition. Creativity is large and small. It's profound and it's simple. Creativity happens every day. And what I have, what I have discovered in this process of growing and experiencing and exploring creativity is that we often forget, we often don't understand, we often don't see, we don't sense, we don't feel and experience those creative moments that we all have. And that's what I want for us as we go from this place, to remember, to notice, and to somehow understand our creativity more deeply. What might be possible if each of us grasped the creativity on the inside? I just was at my nephew's graduation. I picked out a card. We sat around and listened to him read graduation cards with all kinds of platitudes. You can do anything, dream, and on and on and on. All the things that we say to graduates and hopes for their future and hopes for their lives. And while the sentiment is there, it often does not communicate the depth of the effort and the work that those things will take in their lives. And in like manner, that is the same for creativity. We talk about creativity, and it's something that is tossed around and is in some ways a platitude, a simplistic idea, but it requires work. And that, through this process that we have gone through as artists led by Rabbi Sasso, is what we went through, was work of creativity. Creativity's increase. It's that simple. I want to expand this conversation so that it includes all of us, not just artists. It's a foundation of who we are as human beings. Creativity is found in art, but I have that backward. Art is creativity, but creativity isn't necessarily art. Just because you don't call yourself an artist, just because you don't express yourself as an artist, just because you don't experience the world as an artist, does not mean you aren't creative. That's a basic misunderstanding. We misunderstand terms. Creativity and art are two different things. Artists tend to practice their creativity through the arts. But all of us experience the world and have creative energy in our lives, whether we pay attention to it or not. My work as a firefighter, it is very difficult to explain sometimes to people that haven't been brought up to understand creativity in this way. Creative firefighting is a very creative endeavor. It's a process of solving problems. It's a process of bringing something new, a new solution to a problem that needs to be solved. How this relates to Midrash. Midrash, this idea of bringing conversation, bringing questions, bringing potential to the idea of spirituality. If it's a spiritual text or it's just a spiritual question that we're working or struggling with or don't understand, an element of life that we don't comprehend, that we can bring conversation to it. That it's not something that somebody else necessarily has, but it is something that we can wrestle with and work with and develop our own understanding, whether that be in conversation with each other, conversation with spiritual texts, conversations with community, conversations with that creative impulse. Back to those graduation cards and the simplicity and the platitudes that don't communicate the difficult work. What I understood through this creative process, that sculpture back there in the corner is mine. It is based on the Abraham taking Isaac to the mountain to be sacrificed and all of the tremendous implications that brought with it. We can talk about the story afterward, but it was a very difficult thing to, I'm an artist, I bring my perspective. There's a question, I'm an artist, I don't know the answer, and I had to work and work and work through the weeks of communication, conversation, questioning this spiritual understanding that I had. The sculpture is entitled, What Now? Abraham takes Isaac to the mountain and they struggle and there's a potential sacrifice. The sacrifice doesn't happen. They go back and a father attempts to kill his son, to sacrifice his son. It goes on and on with lots of questions. What I came away from that with after much work and struggle and questioning and wondering is, what now? What are we going to do with that story? We all have a story. We carry our past with us. What are we going to do with that story now? And that's how I translated that small scriptural passage into something larger and something I didn't expect. It's something new, some new understanding, a depth and a richness that wasn't there before. because through this process of asking and participating in creation, I was able to understand my spirituality more deeply. And since I've done that, I've come back to a larger, again, understanding of our creativity as a basic impulse of who we are as human beings. What might be possible if each of us grasped the creativity, that creative energy is on the inside of us? How could our world be changed? How could our lives be that much more rich? I want to thank you for this time. I want to thank you for this opportunity. I want to thank you for this conversation. I would like the conversation to continue. One last thought. Oftentimes, as you leave here and you think about creativity, which I hope you do, begin to pay attention to those creative impulses, those thoughts that you might have that prior to now you said, that's just my idea. It's just my thought. That's silly, that won't work. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's large or it's small, if it's reaching out to a friend in a new and different way, if it's creating a new meal, if it's understanding a new poem, if it's understanding new text that you're reading, if it's the desire to create something, to write, to bring it to your work. Creativity is yours to be explored, to be experimented with, to be played with. It's lots of work, it's lots of effort. But what might be possible if you understood that creative impulse? Rabbi Sasso is not only the director, but creator of this program. And as I said, I am profoundly grateful to her for the influence and impact it has had on my spiritual life, on my artistic life, and on my life as a whole. It's created opportunities. It's brought us together this morning. It's created friends and artists that I now have that I didn't before. It's created art that I didn't understand before because she acted on a creative impulse, a creative idea. So thank you, and I look forward to talking more.
Would you mind if we just took a second and asked all the people who have been in RSA as artists, poets, musicians to just rise so you can see them all? And thank you all for coming, and thanks for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Our closing hymn today is number 354 in your gray hymnal. It's We Laugh, We Cry. Would you please rise in body or spirit? We'll sing verses 1, 2, and 4.
Something to which we can
And now we extinguish the flame of our chalice, but not the light of understanding, the warmth of compassion, or the fire of commitment. Let us keep these in our hearts until we meet again. Go with good questions. Go in peace.